The summer sun burned harshly over the dusty plains of Oklahoma Territory. The year was 1917, and Red Willow, a small town surrounded by rolling prairies and sparse forests, was quiet, too quiet. Into this calm rode Elliot Marsh, a traveling salesman with a wagon creaking under the weight of fabrics, trinkets, and curiosities. Elliot was no ordinary salesman. His sharp eyes, framed by streaks of dirt and sweat, scanned the town as if expecting trouble. And in truth, he had reason to be wary. In every town he visited, he felt a presence, someone watching from the shadows, waiting to strike. As he rolled past the general store, a few children peeked at the strange man in the wagon, whispering among themselves. But Elliot barely noticed. He was searching for a safe place to rest, and perhaps, unknowingly, for a person who could change the course of his life. The sun was high when Elliot reached Martha Greene's quilt shop, a quaint, sunlit building tucked between a bakery and a blacksmith. The air inside smelled of lavender and freshly cut fabric, and the walls were adorned with quilts of every color and pattern. Martha Greene, a woman in her late 40s, had lost her husband 5 years prior and had poured all her energy into quilting. She had an uncanny ability to sense the emotional undercurrents of people who entered her shop. "Looking for something special?" she asked, eyeing Elliot's furrowed brow. Elliot hesitated, his fingers brushing the edge of a quilt. "Yes, something that tells a story. Something protective." Martha studied him. She didn't know exactly what he meant, but she could feel the fear radiating off him like heat. "I think I have just the thing," she said softly, already envisioning a quilt unlike any other. That evening, as Elliot settled into the Red Willow Inn, he felt the first tendrils of true dread. Outside his window, a figure lurked in the shadows. The man was tall and rough, muttering to himself as he scribbled notes in a tattered journal. Elliot's heart pounded. His instincts screamed that this man was no ordinary observer. He was tracking him. And Elliot's secret, hidden in a leather-bound ledger, was worth more than gold to the wrong people. He glanced at the quilt Martha had recommended he purchase, unaware of how crucial it would soon become. The next morning, Elliot returned to Martha's shop, pale and trembling. "Someone's following me," he admitted, his voice low. "They won't stop until they have it. Or me." Martha's eyes narrowed. She had seen fear before, but there was something raw and urgent about his. "Then you need protection," she said. "Something that hides you in plain sight." Elliot was skeptical. "A quilt?" he asked, incredulous. Martha nodded. "Yes. Sometimes the safest place is where no one thinks to look. Sometimes the simplest things hold the greatest power." For the next several hours Martha worked tirelessly. Every stitch, every fold, every pocket she sewed into the quilt had a purpose. Some were designed to hold items, some were hidden compartments meant for concealment. To an ordinary observer, it looked like an ordinary quilt, but in reality it could hide secrets. Or even a person. Elliot watched in fascination as Martha transformed plain fabric into a fortress. "It's beautiful," he said softly, feeling an unusual calm in the midst of danger. Martha smiled. "Beauty is often the best disguise for danger." That night, Elliot couldn't sleep. He heard the faint rustle of footsteps outside the shop. Peering through the curtains, he saw the same man who had haunted him at the inn, inspecting the windows with a lantern in hand. The stranger muttered under his breath, jotting down notes. Elliot's heart raced. He realized that the threat was immediate, and the quilt was more than just a comfort. It was his lifeline. With trembling hands, Elliot wrapped himself beneath the quilt. Martha whispered instructions. "Remain still, breathe slowly, and trust the quilt." The intruder entered, lantern swinging. He inspected every corner, knocked over bolts of fabric, and muttered in frustration. Yet the quilt remained untouched. The intruder finally left, cursing the house, unaware that Elliot had been hidden mere feet away. At dawn, Elliot emerged from the quilt, pale but alive. Martha hugged him tightly. "You're safe. For now," she said. Elliot knew he couldn't stay silent any longer. He revealed his secret, a ledger containing evidence of corruption in a powerful oil company. He had been pursued relentlessly, forced to move town to town. Martha listened, horrified, and immediately knew the danger they faced was greater than either of them had imagined. The ledger was small and leather-bound, yet it held enough evidence to ruin powerful men. Elliot had stumbled upon it while traveling across the Midwest, and now every town was a potential trap. Martha studied the ledger. "If this gets into the wrong hands," she said, voice trembling. Elliot nodded. "That's why I need to hide it. And myself." Martha had an idea. A quilt could hide not just him, but the ledger too. Together, they devised a plan. The quilt would become a protective vessel. It would carry Elliot's life and the ledger safely out of Red Willow. Martha's hands moved deftly, sewing new compartments and reinforcing old ones. The quilt had transformed from a simple piece of fabric into a symbol of hope, ingenuity, and trust. As they worked, Elliot shared stories of his travels, lonely nights in strange towns, the faces of people in despair, the constant shadow of danger. Martha spoke of loss, resilience, and the quiet moments that gave her hope. By evening, they were no longer just allies. They were friends, bound together by necessity and an unspoken understanding of courage and survival. Night fell, and the intruder returned, more determined than ever. Elliot and Martha waited silently. When the man broke in, the quilt was ready. Elliot slipped beneath its folds, the ledger safely tucked inside. The intruder searched, grew frustrated, and eventually left empty-handed. The quilt had done its work. Hiding beneath the quilt, Elliot could hear the steady beat of his heart. Fear still gripped him, but so did hope. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, he realized. It was acting despite it. Martha stayed alert outside, ready to call for help if needed. The intruder's departure marked a small victory, but Elliot knew the chase wasn't over. News of the strange events spread quickly. Curious townsfolk gathered, whispering about the quilt that could hide a man. Some scoffed, others speculated about witchcraft. Martha calmly explained the truth to those who asked. The quilt was more than fabric. It was a symbol of ingenuity, courage, and the lengths people go to protect one another. Elliot knew he couldn't linger. The company pursuing him was relentless. Martha devised a plan. He would join a traveling fair, disguised and unnoticed, with the quilt safely hiding the ledger. Elliot marveled at Martha's ingenuity. "You've turned a quilt into armor," he said. She nodded. "Sometimes the simplest tools are the strongest." The morning of his departure was bittersweet. Elliot hugged Martha tightly. "I don't know if I'll ever see you again." "You will," she said firmly. "And even if you don't, remember that courage, trust, and kindness can hide the darkest threats." He stepped into the wagon, leaving Red Willow behind but carrying Martha's lessons with him. Weeks later, the ledger reached its destination, exposing corruption and saving countless lives. Elliot received a letter from Martha, written in the margins of quilt patterns. Sometimes the smallest stitch can change the world. He realized that the quilt had given him more than protection. It had given him hope, purpose, and trust in the goodness of others. Years passed. Elliot returned to Red Willow, a respected man, successful but never forgetting the quilt that had saved him. The town had changed, yet the story of the quilt endured. He visited Martha, now older, but still sharp-eyed. Memories flooded back, the fear, The courage, the unexpected bond. The quilt, folded neatly on a chair, seemed to hum with life. Elliot realized the subtle lesson of his ordeal. Fear is inevitable, danger is real, but kindness, ingenuity, and trust can overcome even the darkest forces. You didn't just make a quilt, he said. You gave me life, courage, and hope. Martha smiled gently. We all have the power to stitch hope into the lives of others. Sometimes we just don't know it until it's needed most. The quilt became a symbol of courage and creativity in Red Willow's small museum. Visitors marveled at its hidden compartments, unaware of the story behind it. The traveling salesman, the relentless pursuer, and the woman who had turned fabric into a lifeline. Elliot and Martha's story became a lesson for generations. Even in the darkest times, ingenuity, compassion, and courage can save lives, hide truths, and inspire hearts.